All right, this week we are going to do an episode of Steven's Geeky Stuff. This is the segment where I like to talk a little bit about something geeky that I have going on. And this is actually something that I literally have going on right now. You are actually literally, if you're watching the video side of things, seeing me. It is the brand new Logitech C922 webcam. This webcam did come out a couple of weeks ago. We briefly touched about it on Better Podcasting. It was announced as a follow-up to the Logitech C920 webcam. Now, the C920 webcam, if you're not familiar with it, is essentially the staple of video show microphones, video show microphones, why not? Video show webcams out there. It is one that a lot of people recommend because the drivers are good, it's clean, it's sharp, it's easy to use, it's relatively cheap, and it's a good way to get into some quality video. Now, I've talked about it on various shows before. I've had a few issues with it, but the C922 was supposed to follow up, and it was, just like I said, announced a couple of weeks ago. The C922, when they announced it geared towards what appeared to be the gamer. They offered a few extra benefits like better low light compensation, better focus. The big thing, though, they pushed was that it was capable of doing 60 frames per second video, which is something that gamers need, because if they're capturing video, they're usually capturing at a higher FPS because they need the higher FPS because they're gamers. The other thing that they announced was that it had a feature called a background replacement, which I'll touch on in a little bit there. Now, while this does seem to be an increase and improvement over the C920, overall, it's a very similar camera. The look of it is identical, with a footnote to that. It is something that shares a lot of the same qualities. If I didn't tell you, you probably would have had no idea that I was on a new webcam. I do have still the old one there. It's my second angle, but it is something that they are very, very similar webcams technologically. Now, I want to give you sort of some initial impressions. Give some initial impressions on this, and I haven't used it extensively. I will do some more tests, put the videos on youtube.com/GonnaGeek. I will make sure to do that there, but I have been using it for 2 weeks now. I used it last week on this show, and I used it on Better Podcasting this past week. So I've got a little bit of history with it. One thing that I want to start off by saying is that while it does say that there are better low light conditions, I haven't noticed a drastic difference. I've actually played with turning on and off the low light setting. I'm not seeing a big difference. Now, this might be because I do set my controls manual elsewise, like my gain and my white balance and all these other things. I do set them manually because if you've ever seen the video, I actually have a backlit backdrop. So I can't really let it automatically go, or the colors behind me will interfere and it'll cause all sorts of problems. The thing is, though, when I look, if I wear a black shirt, I purposely wore a darker shirt today. It doesn't look that much better than the C920 has. One thing that I do really, really like about it is if you've ever used a Logitech webcam controller before, you're probably a little familiar with it. You go in, there's a little Logitech panel and gives you all your different options. It lets you adjust your gain and your white balance and your exposure and all this other stuff there. Little drop sliders that you can adjust back and forth. Well, if you are doing a video show like we are, you probably do set a lot of these things manually. And here's the problem with that. Unfortunately, if you disconnect or unplug, just cough the wrong way, a lot of times those settings will reset. And then you have to go in and set them again. Well, how can you do that? Because there's no numbers, there's no reference points, there's no real way for you to tell what settings you were on before, other than doing what I did, which was screen capturing the window and then taking the control, perfectly lining it up with the screen capture and bouncing back and forth to make sure I got it back 100%. Kept adjusting the slider until they matched up. Well, with the C922, they've taken a different approach. You still have those sliders, but they do give you reference numbers. So you can get it bang on every time. When you go in there and you set your exposure, you get a number. Now, here's the flip side of that coin. I know SP's had a little different experience, but I have used the Logitech C920 web camera under several different Windows installs, And the only times I have had it reset itself is if I have unplugged it or installed a driver. Those are the only two times I've had it reset itself. I know SP's mentioned before, you said there's been some times that you've restarted it and it's reset itself, right?
Every single time.
Yeah. For me, I have not had that. However, on the same camera, the same rig, same computer, every time I restart, the Logitech C922 does reset itself. So that's sort of the opposite side. Now, quick fix with the numbers, it's easy. I'm going to make myself a little sticky note or print it out. I'm going to put it right in front of me. Bang, 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 bang. I'll have it set in like 30 seconds. It'll be super quick because those reference numbers are there. Very, very nice to finally have that, especially with this webcam. They were gearing it towards vloggers, YouTubers, YouTube gamers, things like that. Twitchers, the whole ordeal. So it's nice that they did that. Now, one other thing that I want to comment on here is I mentioned that I didn't see that there was much of improvement in the low light. However, comparing a couple of images back and forth, I do think that it is a little bit sharper than the C920. Not drastically, but it does look a little sharper. And I've had SP this past weekend. We were doing some tests and he commented on it actually. So I'm not the only one seeing it, but it does seem a little bit sharper. I don't know what the reason is for that, but it does seem a little bit sharper. The other thing that I should mention with this as well is that I do think it's probably using a little different driver. I've read that both cameras use a hardware encoder, but obviously the one can do 60 frames per second, the other cannot. Now, here's the other reason why I think that there's a difference in driver or something like that. Because this past week, little inside baseball, SP and I had some Skype issues between each other last week. So much so that SP couldn't read the entire show the entire time. We spent probably 5 hours all together over this past weekend, him and I together, doing a bunch of tests, because we could only find that this problem was happening between him and I. I would try somebody else, it would be fine. He would try somebody else, would be fine. So him and I had to work on that. That's the insider baseball. But what we determined during this testing was that we were only able on the brand new Logitech C922 for me to be able to send him 720 resolution. As soon as I went to the C920, it went up to 1080. So there's something happening there. Now, I don't know enough about it. I haven't played around with it long enough. But as I mentioned, this camera is geared towards gamers. And one of the big things is that 60 frames per second, which they advertise is only possible on 720. So I'm guessing out of the box, it's set up to be 720 for that reason. Or maybe that's the only way that it's working with Skype. I don't know. Maybe it's meant only to do 1080 now with XSplit and other software, and 720 for everything else. There are some webcams like that. Microsoft actually had a webcam where you could only use 1080 through through a piece of software. So maybe that's the case with this, and that was the way they were able to do that 60 frames per second. I really don't know. But that's sort of the summary and the initial information I found about it. I'm pretty happy with it, and overall it's doing what I want it to do. It's not set up in an ideal scenario right now, but I want it to have that second camera angle. I have it right now. Like I said, not much of a difference between the two, but I am indeed planning on doing a little more with that. And so I needed to have two cameras. And the problem with hooking up two Logitech C920 cameras is the drivers interfered. And if you did have to go and set white balance or something like that, it was really hit and miss which of the two you were going to be configuring. So I had to go with two different models. And really in this range, the only other options were spending a buttload of money towards a professional camera and all this other stuff, or like a Microsoft camera. And I really didn't want to go to Microsoft. So when the C922 came out, I was like, boom, this is the way it's going to go. And if that wasn't enough, it has a white on light rather than a blue light, which is just so much nicer. So much nicer.
So which version did you get? Because I know they bundled two versions, one with like a tripod and 3 months of XSplit and one with 6 months of XSplit.
I got it directly from Logitech.ca, and it was the 3 month with the tripod, which I'm using for the second camera right now, the old C920. It's been downgraded to the C920, but I won't end up using that long term. It's actually, I don't know. There'll be an unboxing on youtube.com/GonnaGeek, but the thing is, it's tough. It's metal, but I don't know what's really going to last that much better than like a dollar store one, because the dollar store ones are still pretty beefy for a couple of bucks.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty funny because we collectively have experienced the progression in Logitech cameras for streaming, for Skype calls, whatever. I actually have this, I think it's a 9000 Pro or something like that, that's still connected up to my system as my second camera, and it will only go up to 720, but and 2 megapixel whatever for actual still photos. But it was feasible for me to do with a second camera. I know, Chris, you have the C270, right?
Right, that's the first webcam I had gotten for starting to do the video stuff with the C270, and it is still on top of my monitor. However, it is not plugged into anything, except I think it was plugged into my laptop most recently, and I was using the laptop to broadcast from here, so it looked like I was broadcasting while staring at my main monitor.
And then the next evolution was the C920, which had been the stalwart for years. And we were all wondering, are they going to improve on this? Because cell phone cameras actually are better than the resolution in some cases, the low light capability, whatever, the C920. Now they've improved on it with the C922. You will notice it is not 4K capable because you do not want to stream 4K.
No.
There's no pipe available today, common pipe anyway, that will take that. So that is the pinnacle of what we're doing right now is the C922.
There's two other notes that I actually had on this. One was the flicker control. We've talked a little bit about how there was supposed to be something that helps adjust to the flickering of monitors and other things like that. I actually have to say, I've had pretty good success with this. When we recorded Better Podcasting this week, I used one of the colors, which I usually avoid because it actually interferes with the camera. There's two versions of the orange we use on Better Podcasting, and one of them often the flicker gets picked up by the C920. Didn't happen this week on Better Podcasting. The C922 did filter it out. So I was pretty happy to see that. Chris, you had another question. Sorry, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, you were talking about 4K video potentially. YouTube doesn't even let you do 4K live streams yet. I think they're capped out at 1440p.
Right. Well, I'm, again, 4K. I've seen the way that it was only recently that I could get a reasonable speed up in Canada, so I'm not that sold on 4K for that reason. Last thing that I am going to talk about on this before we do wrap up the show there, I know you're wondering. You guys are sitting there on the edge of your seat and you're like, Steven, you missed the most important part. This is the part that I want personally, why I put my pre-order in for the C922. I am looking forward to this. I just have dreams about it every night, and I just want to know, how does that background replacement work on the Logitech C922? Now, for you listeners and viewers, if you're not familiar with it, the Logitech C920, one of the features that they did quite proudly put in their press release was that it has the option to enable what's called background replacement. Essentially, blue screens no more. It will figure out your surroundings and remove you from them so that it can be embedded on a game and put you in the game. So, audio listeners, you're going to hear me rambling for about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Go to youtube.com/GonnaGeek or geeks.link/165 to watch this example that I've prepared for you guys. Here we go. Okay, Steven Jondrew here from GonnaGeek.com, here to demo and test the background replacement tool on the Logitech C922 webcam. You'll see I have my lights off behind me because I figured that this is a great example of something that someone might actually have in their house. They just have a sort of dynamic background behind them. Maybe it's their living room, who knows? Something that isn't crisp and clean. And I'm just going to go ahead and enable it. Are you ready? Let's find out in 3, 2, 1. So there you go. That's the background replacement on the Logitech C922. You'll see that there's some monitors off to the side, which could be somebody's TV. They're kind of half there, half not. I seem to have a large portion of me over my right shoulder that's showing. It's kind of getting a little confused here. I'm not sure what is going on here with this. As I move, it looks like I'm losing part of my chin to the microphone. It's removing the microphone. I don't know. Really weird. Kind of odd how it's It's picking this stuff up here, especially this section over the shoulder here. It's not really helpful when it still has it all there. Let me turn it off and back on. Let's see if it makes a difference. Nope. Okay, what I'll do is I'll go and I'll replace this with something solid behind me, and we'll see what it looks like. I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so now you'll see behind me, I have something a little more solid. I have it a little backlit just to demo what it would be like. You'll see there's a couple shadowy patches. That's actually intentional. Intentionally because I'm lazy, but also because I figured that people often don't have even backgrounds. So let's give this a shot in 3, 2, 1. Wow, I have no hair. I guess this is what I would look like if I was Chris Farrell from the Gonna Geek podcast. Anyways, I know that was a low shot, but very interesting. It seems to be taking more of the back route now. Either way, I am not impressed. Not impressed at all. And there you go. Oh, look, as I move my hands, I'm a torso. I'm the Walking Dead. Woo! Anyways, that's it. Not that great. Who knows? Maybe it would be better with a little bit more solid of background, a little better lit. But at that point, why don't I just get into a green screen? So pretty much what I expected. Maybe other people will have better results. Maybe there are some settings I'm not seeing, but here I'm just not that impressed. Bye. So, what'd you guys think? I'll start with Chris. Go ahead. You can send your letter bomb to me, Chris.
You're mean. No, in all seriousness, the chroma key stuff is pretty underwhelming.
Yeah. SB, I know you also had big eye rolls when you read this in the press release. SB, what was your thoughts?
So you kind of looked a cross between Max Headroom and the AI in Red Dwarf when you were doing that. And no, it is not ready for prime time. I'm glad they actually put it out. Like, okay, this is what we have. But once you see it, you're like, no, I'll put up a green screen and do it myself.
Yeah, now I haven't played much around with it, but what I do know is that the way that it works is there is an app called Personify, I believe it is. Personify Chroma Cam is what they give you, and that's the portion that you select. So like when I was recording that in XSplit, I went in and it gives me two options for web cameras. It asks, do I want to use the Logitech C922 or do I want to use Personify for the Logitech C922? So it actually shows up as a separate device. This is the same thing within Skype. It shows up as a separate device, and that's what you have to do, and you control it. And when I go in there, not much settings. It basically allows me to change the background if I wanted to, and that's about it, and turn it on and off. I did not see a lot of options in there from what I saw. Maybe it's just beginning, but with both tests that I did, I think the only way it would probably work was if I was against a solid wall that was half decently lit. I think that might have a fighting chance then. Like if I was against a beige wall or something, I think it might work. Like something that is different enough from what I'm wearing and everything else, it might work. I don't know. It is a letdown in either case. Personally, unless there's something I'm missing, and I don't know, maybe I am missing something. If you're going to be using it for XSplit or whatever, go to the dollar store and buy yourself a few pieces of poster board. You're probably going to have better success.
So I'm glad you showed us your impressions of the C922, because I was super curious when I saw it come out, the press announcement that is. But at this point, I'm sticking with my C920, man. It works perfectly fine for everything I need right now.
Mm-hmm.
When you go on Amazon, I just checked right now, a new C920 is $67, a new C922 is $99. So for my purposes, I don't care about 60 frames per second at 720p. So I'm sticking with this device, I think.
I'm so glad you said that. And I know that SP has it pulled up. I can see him in the Google Doc ready. I will let SP actually read the last note that I had in my review, because I actually have this written down right now. Go ahead, SP, and finish my review.
From Steven, quote, overall, pretty similar to the C920. At this time, I'd say if there is a sale on the C920, just go that way. If you need a second HD camera, this is the way to go.
Yeah, that's my
Unquote.
impressions. Honestly, that is my impressions. And I don't see people needing to go out and dish their C922s at this time, unless they want that driver change.
Ditch the C920. You said C922.
Sorry, ditch their C920. Yes, that's what I meant. But good camera, absolutely good camera. But it definitely deserved a very slight model increment. It really, anything more than C922. If it went C923, I would have said BS at Logitech, BS.
I wonder if this is just their first step towards their next webcam. Granted, we took like 5 years to get to the C922. I wonder if Logitech has some plan to put the 922 out there now, put that out there as their intermediate product, and maybe a year or two from now we get, say, the C925, which is their new super webcam that's learned a lot of lessons from what did and didn't work from the 922. Or maybe I'm just wishful thinking because I just want a better webcam.